True story from New York. My brother tied me up and said, "Now you'll learn what real women do." I was only 12 when everything changed. Growing up in the cramped apartments of Queens, my family was tight-knit but complicated. My brother Jake was 5 years older, someone I looked up to, someone I trusted, or at least I thought I did. It started with little things. A touch here, a comment there. Moments I brushed off because I didn't understand them. But the fear began to creep in the day he locked the door behind us, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Now you'll learn what real women do," he whispered, his voice a cruel promise that shattered my world. I tried to resist, tried to scream, but his grip was strong, and the ropes he tied around my wrists cut into my skin. The room spun, my heart pounding in my chest as helplessness overwhelmed me. In that moment, everything I believed about safety and family was destroyed. Afterward, silence swallowed me. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not a friend. I was trapped by shame and confusion, unsure if what had happened was my fault. Each day at school felt heavier, each glance a reminder of the secret I carried alone. The weight of his betrayal made me withdraw, my bright spirit dimming under the shadow of fear. Nights were the worst, the memories invading my dreams, leaving me gasping awake. I started to believe the lies he told me, that I was broken, that I deserved this. But deep inside, a flicker of resistance began to grow. I realized I couldn't let this define me. I needed to find my voice, to break free from the silence that had imprisoned me. It was the first step on a long, painful journey toward healing and reclaiming my life. Days turned into weeks, and the secret gnawed at me relentlessly. I couldn't escape the memories of that night, but I knew I had to find a way out of the darkness. I started writing in a notebook I hid beneath my mattress. My thoughts, my fears, everything I dared not say aloud. It became my refuge, a place where I could be honest without judgment. One afternoon at school, my teacher, Mrs. Martinez, noticed something was wrong. Her eyes softened when I sat quietly during class, staring into nothing. After school, she asked me to stay behind. Hesitant, I nodded, heart pounding. She gently asked if I wanted to talk, and for the first time I let a crack appear in my armor. I told her I was scared and confused, but didn't say why. Mrs. Martinez didn't push, she just listened. Then she told me about a counselor who helped kids who felt lost or hurt. The thought of talking to someone terrified me, but her kindness gave me hope. That evening, I took the notebook and showed it to my mom. Her eyes filled with tears as she read my words. I felt both relief and fear. Relief that she knew, fear of what would come next. Together we contacted the counselor. The journey ahead was uncertain and scary, but I wasn't alone anymore. I began to understand that healing wouldn't be quick or easy, but it was possible. My brother's betrayal didn't have to define my future. The first counseling session was harder than I imagined. Sitting in that small room, facing a stranger who wanted to hear my story, made my chest tighten. I felt exposed and vulnerable, but the counselor's calm voice helped me breathe through the panic. Slowly, I started to share pieces of what had happened, how my brother's words echoed in my mind, how I felt trapped by fear and shame. Each week I returned, peeling back layers I had buried deep inside. The counselor taught me that what happened wasn't my fault, that the twisted things my brother said were lies meant to control and hurt me. Hearing those truths spoken out loud was painful but also freeing. I learned that healing didn't mean forgetting, but reclaiming my power. At home, things shifted too. Mom became my anchor, her strength unwavering as she fought alongside me. She helped me navigate the police reports, court dates, and the flood of emotions that came crashing down. The police took my statement seriously, and the investigation began. I was scared my brother would deny everything, but I knew I had to be brave. School became a challenge. Some classmates whispered, others avoided me. I hated feeling like I was different, like a broken secret, but my counselor encouraged me to focus on the friends who stayed, the ones who listened, who didn't judge. Their support became a lifeline. Slowly, I rediscovered small joys, drawing, music, quiet moments outside. I started to believe that maybe one day the fear would fade and I could live without looking over my shoulder. I knew the road ahead was long, but for the first time I felt I was walking it on my own terms. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I sat in the courtroom, the sterile smell and cold walls making my stomach churn. My heart pounded as the judge called the case, and my brother was led in, handcuffed and distant. The man who had once been my brother now seemed like a stranger, someone dangerous and broken. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a wave of fear crash over me. But I remembered the counselor's words, "Speak your truth, no matter how hard." My voice shook as I described the nights, the words, the fear that had haunted me. I looked at my brother, seeing no remorse in his eyes, only anger and denial. The defense attorney tried to twist my words, questioning every detail, making me doubt myself. But I held firm. I wasn't going to let him erase what happened or make me feel small. The prosecutor was patient, supportive, helping me find strength in the chaos. Outside the courtroom, the media waited, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. It was overwhelming, but I had Mom by my side. She held my hand tightly, reminding me that I was not alone. The truth was out now, and no one could take it back. The trial dragged on, the days blurring together. Each session reopened wounds, but I grew stronger. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every girl and woman, silenced by fear. I wanted my story to be a beacon for others, a sign that they could survive and reclaim their lives. One evening after a long day in court, I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker. The past still lingered, but so did hope. I promised myself that no matter what happened next, I would keep moving forward, for me, for my future. The verdict day arrived with a heavy weight in the air. I sat nervously in the courtroom, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. The judge's voice echoed through the room as he began to read the decision. Time seemed to slow, every breath feeling like a lifetime. When the words guilty finally filled the room, a wave of relief crashed over me. Justice had been served, but the journey wasn't over. My brother's sentence was a small step toward healing, but the scars he left ran deep. I knew I had to rebuild myself, piece by piece. Outside, supporters and strangers approached me, offering kind words and embraces. Their belief in me strengthened my resolve. I realized my story was bigger than just my pain. It was a message of survival and strength. Each day since then, I fought to reclaim my identity and rewrite my future. Therapy became my refuge, a safe space to confront the nightmares and fears. It wasn't easy. Some days the memories threatened to consume me, but I refused to let them define me. With each session, I found new courage, new ways to cope. My family was divided. Some couldn't accept the truth. Others rallied around me. The hardest part was losing the brother I thought I knew. Grieving that loss was another battle, one that left emptiness where love once lived. Slowly, I began to find peace. I focused on my dreams, education, a career, friendships rebuilt. The world no longer felt like a prison, but a place where I could create joy and hope. The night I took my first steps outside without fear, I felt reborn. The chains he had tied around my soul were broken. I was no longer the victim. I was a survivor, a woman ready to live on her own terms. The road to healing was not linear. Some days I felt strong. Other days the weight of betrayal and pain pulled me under. But each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory over the darkness my brother had cast on my life. I learned to trust again, starting with myself. I surrounded myself with people who believed in me, friends who became family. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that love and kindness still existed beyond the walls of my past. Slowly, laughter returned to my days, and hope began to bloom in the cracks of my broken heart. I threw myself into my work and studies, determined to build a future that was mine alone. Every achievement, every goal met was a declaration of my resilience. The dreams my brother tried to steal were now mine to chase freely, without fear or shame. But healing also meant confronting the trauma head-on. Therapy was hard, sometimes unbearable, but necessary. I unpacked years of silence, anger, and grief, piece by piece. I learned to forgive, not for him but for me, to release the chains of bitterness that threatened to consume my spirit. There were moments of doubt, nights when I questioned if I would ever be whole again, but I kept moving forward, step by step, day by day. I realized healing was not about forgetting, but about reclaiming my life, my voice, and my power. My relationship with my family remained complicated. Some healed with me, others chose distance. but I understood that my peace could not depend on their acceptance. It had to come from within. One day, standing in front of a mirror, I saw not just the girl my brother had tried to break, but a woman forged in fire, strong, brave, and unyielding. I was no longer bound by his shadow. I was free. Freedom felt unfamiliar at first, like stepping into sunlight after years spent in darkness. I had survived the nightmare, but the scars remained, both visible and invisible. The journey ahead was one of rebuilding, of rediscovery. I had to learn who I was beyond the pain, beyond the betrayal. I found strength in small victories. The first time I spoke openly about what happened, the knot in my throat slowly untied. Sharing my story was terrifying, but it shattered the silence that had imprisoned me. Each word spoken was a brick removed from the walls of shame and fear. Support groups became a sanctuary. Hearing others' stories mirrored my own struggle and triumph, reminding me I was not alone. Together we forged bonds of resilience, lifting one another with empathy and understanding. The road was hard, but the company made it bearable. Education became a refuge. I pursued classes and workshops focused on empowerment and healing. Learning about trauma and recovery gave me tools to navigate my emotions. It was empowering to transform pain into knowledge, to understand my mind and body's responses instead of fearing them. Trust, however, was a fragile flower. I tread cautiously in relationships, wary of vulnerability. But over time, I found people who honored my boundaries and respected my journey. I learned that love could be gentle, that safety was possible. Legal battles loomed as well. Holding my brother accountable was not about revenge. It was about justice and protection for others. The courtroom was daunting, filled with memories I wished to bury. Yet standing there, I realized my courage extended beyond survival. It demanded action. Facing my abuser in court was a crucible. His denials and manipulations tested my resolve, but I had witnesses, evidence, and a truth that burned brighter than his lies. Every question posed was an opportunity to reclaim my voice, to say, "This happened. I am not ashamed." When the verdict came, relief flooded through me. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was validation. The weight I carried lightened, but I knew healing was ongoing. Justice had been served, but peace was mine to create. Now as I walk forward, I do so with a fierceness born from struggle. My story no longer defines me. It empowers me. I am a survivor, a warrior, and a woman reclaiming her life, one day at a time. Life after the trial was a whirlwind of emotions. I was no longer just the girl tied up and silenced. I was a woman with a voice loud enough to shatter the walls that had once trapped me. But healing wasn't linear. Some days were filled with hope, others shadowed by memories that refused to fade. Therapy became my lifeline. Sitting across from someone who understood trauma gave me permission to feel without judgment. Each session peeled back layers of pain and shame, exposing wounds that needed care. I learned coping strategies, not to forget, but to live alongside the past without being consumed by it. Reconnecting with my family was complicated. Some relatives rallied around me, offering love and support, while others struggled to face the truth. I had to redefine what family meant, not just blood, but those who stood by me unconditionally. Choosing who to keep close was a difficult but necessary step in reclaiming my life. Work offered structure and purpose. Throwing myself into my career helped me regain confidence and autonomy. The skills I developed in silence and survival translated into resilience and determination. Slowly, I found balance between honoring my journey and building a future I deserved. Romance was daunting. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. I guarded my heart fiercely, cautious of anyone who tried to get too close. But love, when genuine, has a way of healing wounds. I discovered that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was courage in its purest form. Advocacy became my mission. Sharing my story publicly was terrifying, but it fueled change. Speaking at events, mentoring others, and participating in campaigns gave me a sense of purpose beyond my pain. Every voice raised helped dismantle the silence that allowed abuse to persist. The scars, both seen and unseen, reminded me of my strength. They were symbols not of defeat, but of survival. I carried them proudly, knowing they marked the path I'd traveled and the battles I'd won. Today I stand tall, no longer defined by the chains that once bound me. I am a survivor, a fighter, and a beacon of hope for those still trapped in darkness. My story is far from over. It's a testament to the unbreakable spirit within us all. The road to rebuilding trust with myself was the hardest journey I ever faced. After the nightmare, I often questioned my worth, wondering if I was broken beyond repair. But slowly, piece by piece, I started reclaiming my identity. I surrounded myself with people who saw me as I was, not as a victim, but as a person capable of love, joy, and success. I found solace in simple things: morning sunlight streaming through the window, the comforting rhythm of my favorite songs, the smell of fresh coffee. These small moments reminded me that life still held beauty, even when pain lingered. I learned to celebrate progress, no matter how small, and forgive myself for days when the weight felt too heavy. Setting boundaries became crucial. For years I'd been taught to stay silent, to please others at the cost of my own safety. Now, I practice saying no without guilt. I embrace self-care as a form of resistance, a way to declare that my needs mattered just as much as anyone else's. This shift wasn't easy. Old fears tried to pull me back, but each time I chose to stand firm. Work became more than a paycheck. It was a platform for empowerment. I took on projects that challenged me and surrounded myself with colleagues who respected my voice. At times, I struggled with imposter syndrome, wondering if I truly belonged. But with each success, confidence grew, slowly replacing doubt with determination. Relationships tested my newfound strength. Trusting others after betrayal felt risky, but I learned to listen to my intuition and communicate openly. I sought partners who valued honesty and kindness, and I refused to settle for less. Love, I realized, was not about perfection but mutual respect and growth. Through advocacy work, I connected with a community of survivors and allies. Sharing my story helped others see they were not alone. The collective strength we built fueled my healing and inspired hope for systemic change. I realized that by speaking up, I was rewriting the narrative, not just for myself, but for everyone affected. Though scars remain, they no longer define me. They are reminders of resilience and transformation. I am learning every day to live fully, to embrace vulnerability, and to honor the woman I've become. Healing isn't linear. Some days I wake up feeling lighter, the past grip loosened just enough to breathe freely. Other days memories crash in waves, uninvited and overwhelming. But I've learned to ride those waves, to honor the pain without letting it drown me. Each step forward counts, even if I stumble along the way. Therapy became my anchor. Talking about what happened, naming the fears and anger, helped me reclaim control. It was terrifying at first to lay my wounds bare, but the safety I found in that space was transformative. I discovered parts of myself I'd forgotten, the hopeful, vibrant woman who deserved peace. Self-forgiveness was the hardest lesson. I carried guilt for surviving, for not stopping the abuse sooner, for the ways I thought I had failed. But slowly I understood that the blame belonged where it did, not on me. I was a child caught in a storm, and surviving was an act of courage, not weakness. Reconnecting with family was complicated. Some relatives offered support, their presence a balm to my fractured soul. Others couldn't face the truth, choosing silence or denial. I had to accept that not everyone could walk this path with me. Protecting my peace meant creating distance where necessary, even when it hurt. Work became a source of pride and identity. I poured energy into causes that mattered, helping others find their voices, advocating for survivors, pushing for policies that hold abusers accountable. The professional world recognized my passion and resilience, but more importantly, I recognized my own worth. Friendships shifted too. True friends stood by me, listening without judgment, offering steady support. I learned the value of vulnerability and building connections. Those who couldn't meet me there faded away, making room for relationships built on trust and respect. Most importantly, I reclaimed my body. For years it had been a battleground of fear and pain. Through gentle movement, mindfulness, and care, I began to feel safe again in my own skin. Every small victory, a deep breath, a stretch, a moment of stillness, was a testament to my strength. I am no longer defined by what was done to me, but by how I've risen from it. My story is still unfolding, a testament to endurance, hope, and the power of reclaiming your own life. The scars I carry aren't just physical, they're woven into my very being. But with time, they've transformed from symbols of pain into marks of survival. Each one tells a story of endurance, reminding me how far I've come and how fiercely I continue to fight. For years, silence was my shield. I buried the truth deep inside, afraid that speaking out would shatter what little stability I had left. But silence became its own kind of prison, isolating me from the world and from myself. Breaking that silence was the beginning of freedom. When I finally told my story, the reactions were mixed. Some listened with open hearts, their support a lifeline. Others turned away, unwilling to confront the darkness I revealed. It was painful, but I learned to stand firm, knowing that my truth mattered regardless of others' acceptance. Justice was another battle entirely. Navigating the legal system was exhausting and often re-traumatizing. There were moments when hope flickered and moments when despair threatened to consume me, but I held on to the belief that accountability was possible, that the law could be a tool for healing rather than harm. The courtroom was a crucible. Facing my abuser, recounting the nightmare over and over, demanded strength I didn't know I had. Each question, each cross-examination, chipped away at the walls I'd built around my pain. But standing there, I also found power, the power to claim my voice and refuse to be silenced. Outside the courtroom, life demanded balance. There were days when exhaustion weighed heavily, and the world felt overwhelming. Yet, even in those moments, I found reasons to keep moving forward. A kind word, a moment of peace, a future I still dared to imagine. Relationships shifted. Trust was fragile, but I learned to nurture it slowly. I surrounded myself with people who saw me fully, who didn't shy away from my scars but embraced my resilience. Together we built a circle of healing and hope. Each sunrise brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. I found strength in small victories, laughing again, dreaming again, loving again. My journey is far from over, but I walk it with courage, knowing that my past does not define my future. Healing is not linear. Some days feel lighter, like a breeze lifting the weight from my shoulders. Other days the past crashes back with a force that takes my breath away. It's in those moments I remind myself that healing is a process, not a destination. Therapy became my anchor. Talking through the trauma wasn't easy. It forced me to face the darkest corners of my mind. But each session chipped away at the shame and fear, replacing them with understanding and self-compassion. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to what happened to me, but to who I am beyond those moments. Reclaiming my body was another challenge. For so long it had been a battleground, a place where pain and fear lived. Slowly I started to see it differently, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Movement, dance, even simple walks became acts of defiance, celebrations of resilience and life. Setting boundaries was crucial. I had to protect my peace, sometimes saying no to people in situations that threatened my well-being. It was difficult, especially when guilt and obligation tugged at me, but I learned that self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. Connecting with others who understood my experience helped me feel less alone. Support groups, friendships, and online communities became spaces of shared strength. Listening to others' stories and sharing mine created bonds that healed alongside me. Trusting again was hard. After betrayal, every new relationship carried shadows of doubt, but I discovered that vulnerability can be a strength when placed in safe hands. Slowly, I built new connections grounded in honesty, respect, and mutual care. I found purpose in advocacy. Sharing my story to help others turned my pain into power. Speaking out against abuse, supporting survivors, and working to change systems that failed me gave me a voice and a mission beyond myself. Looking ahead, I carry hope that my story can inspire others to speak, to heal, to fight. Hope that change is possible, not just for me, but for all who suffer in silence. Hope that one day, no one will have to endure what I did. Every day is a step forward. Some are small, almost invisible, but each counts. I walk this path with courage, knowing that my story is still being written, and this time, I hold the pen. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of papers and the steady tap of the judge's gavel. My heart pounded as the prosecutor laid out the evidence against my brother. Every word cut deep, but I knew the truth had to come out. The nightmare that had haunted me for years was finally being exposed in front of everyone. I watched my brother from across the room, his face unreadable, his eyes cold. The man who once held my hand, whispered promises, and pretended to love me, was now exposed as my captor, my tormentor. The contrast was unbearable. The defense attorney tried to paint a different picture, claiming my brother was misunderstood, that he was a victim too, but I saw through the lies. I remembered every scream, every tear, every moment I felt trapped and broken. Testifying was the hardest thing I've ever done. Standing there recounting the horrors, I felt the weight of judgment, both from the jury and from within myself, but I spoke anyway. For every person who couldn't speak, for every silence that hid pain. My family was fractured beyond repair. Some sided with me, others with him. The betrayal stung worse than the abuse itself, but I chose my truth over their doubts. I chose healing over denial. Outside the courtroom, strangers whispered, some stared, Others offered quiet support. The world seemed to watch, waiting for justice. I prayed the system would deliver it, even as I feared it might fail me. Days turned into weeks. The trial dragged on, but with each testimony the facade cracked. Witnesses came forward, neighbors, friends, sharing what they knew or suspected. The community's silence began to break. Finally, the verdict. Guilty. The word echoed in the room, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. Justice wasn't a cure, but it was a step toward reclaiming my life. That night, alone in my room, I let the tears fall, not just for the past, but for the future I dared to dream. A future where my voice was heard, where I was free. After the verdict, life didn't suddenly become easier. The courtroom's echoes faded, but the shadows of the past lingered. Every step forward felt heavy, as if the weight of what happened still clung to my skin. Healing was not a straight line. It twisted and turned, with days of hope followed by nights of doubt. Friends reached out, some with open arms, others with hesitant words. I learned who truly stood beside me, and who disappeared when things got hard. Trust had been shattered, but slowly I started to rebuild it, piece by fragile piece. Therapy became my refuge, a place where I could unravel the tangled threads inside me without fear. I met other survivors there, their stories mirroring mine, their strength inspiring. For the first time in years, I felt less alone, yet the hardest battles were often silent ones, facing myself, confronting the pain I'd buried deep. Flashbacks hit without warning, and sometimes the fear returned like a storm. But each time, I reminded myself, survival was my power, not just escape. My relationship with my family remained fractured. Some refused to accept the truth, choosing denial over healing. I had to let go of the hope that everyone would understand. Protecting myself became the priority, setting boundaries that once felt impossible. Gradually, I began to find small joys again, sunsets that didn't remind me of darkness, laughter that wasn't forced, moments of peace that felt real. I learned to celebrate my resilience, honoring the strength it took to speak up and stand tall. I also became determined to help others trapped in silence, volunteering at support groups, sharing my story cautiously. I hoped to light a path for those still lost in the shadows. Change starts with one voice, and I was ready to be that voice. The road ahead was long, but I no longer feared the journey. Each step was a testament to my courage, a promise that my past would not define me, but empower me. The years after the trial tested me in ways I never imagined. Healing was ongoing, a process of learning to live again with the scars I carried, both visible and hidden. There were setbacks, moments when the past clawed back into my present, threatening to pull me under. But I refused to let it define me. Work became a new focus, a way to reclaim control. I poured myself into my career, driven not just by ambition, but by a desire to prove that I was more than what had happened. Colleagues noticed my quiet strength, and slowly, I earned respect, not as a victim, but as a survivor and a leader. Still, relationships were complicated. Trust was fragile. Opening my heart felt risky, but over time, I found people who accepted my history without judgment. Their support became a lifeline, teaching me that vulnerability could be met with kindness. I also reconnected with family members who had once turned away. Some apologies came, healing words spoken, but not all wounds could be mended. I learned that forgiveness didn't always mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace for myself. Advocacy became a powerful outlet. I spoke at community events and schools, sharing my story to break the silence around abuse and trauma. The faces in the audience, some fearful, others hopeful, reminded me that change begins with courage. Despite the challenges, I found moments of unexpected joy, quiet mornings, music that stirred my soul, friendships that blossomed into chosen family. I celebrated every small victory, knowing that healing was as much about reclaiming happiness as confronting pain. The journey was far from over, but I had transformed my story from one of suffering into one of strength. I was no longer a prisoner of my past, I was its author. And with each new day, I wrote a future filled with hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief that I deserved peace.